All right, so I transitioned here to my workbench and I'm going to give you an overhead view of working with this string, wrapping it around the drum, and trying to deconstruct exactly what happens here with our sine and cosine functions. All right, in this video I've got the drum and it's now labeled. So I've got the y-axis, and that's the vertical one, and the x-axis, and I've also labeled here the distance from the center to the edge. We're going to consider that to be just 1 unit long. We don't really care exactly how long, but we're going to imagine this circle. This circle is just 1 unit long, okay? So that means this is 0, 0 in the center, and then out to the right here, this would be the point 1, 0, okay? And if we were using coordinates. Now, what I'm going to do is drums have these different tensioning rods on the edges, and what they do is they pull the drum head closer to the shell, and so they tighten a lot with this rim. And so I'm going to use those as guiding marks as I go around the drum. And so I'm going to use the same idea as before. I'm going to grab my length of string here. This length of the string is equal to, this long length of the string is equal to the circumference. The length of it is equal to the circumference all the way around this drum. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these lugs to mark off at different spots. And when I do, I'm going to use a different length of string here to mark how high up I went on the y-axis. And so I'll try to show you that when I go around. So the first one up, as I go around, I'm going to have to, this is going to be the starting point here. And I'm going to start here at this spot, and I'm going to go around the rim until right here. So I'm going to do two things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark on my string here, this mark right here. I'm just going to put a little green mark on my string so I can keep track of that. You'll see why in a bit. But I'm just marking this string here. So this is the starting point, this is the starting point, and this is where I'm marking the string. So it goes around the drum, from my starting point to right there. And then right here, what I want to do on the drum, is I want to measure the height from that point, because I went around this way with the string, a specific length. I want to measure the height of that from the x-axis. So in other words, I'm getting the y-coordinate right here. The y-coordinate, here's the y-axis, I want the y-coordinate, I want that length, and I want to mark that with string. So it's going to be approximate, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this, and I'm actually going to cut the length perfectly. Well, not perfectly. So right about there, I need to cut, and I'm going to take all of these pieces of string, and so I'm going to set this piece of string aside, setting that aside, and I'm just going to keep working my way around the whole drum until I get all of them. So got to keep taking this string. I think I'll mark the 0 as well where I started. All right, and I'm going to work my way around. Enjoy this process. All right, so what I just did is I took that circumference string, the string that matches the circumference, the length around the circle, and every time I got to a lug, or actually one of these cardinal locations, I took a piece of yellow string and I measured how far away it was from our x-axis. So here's our x-axis, right? Here's our y-axis, and essentially I was measuring the y-coordinate, or the height of it. So I took a piece of string right here when I got to a lug, and I measured that. And I just kept that process going, and so I ended up with all of these different, you can call them heights if you will. All right, so right here I didn't have to measure any height because there's no height here, right? It's just on the x-axis. And I continued that process on the negative side as well. And I wasn't perfect, but it was pretty approximate here. So it's, you know, the string kind of moves. It's not super scientific, but there's a pattern here. So that's essentially what I did. I've got these heights that are positive ones, and then these were below the x-axis. So again, as I went around, that particular length mapped to a location on the drum, on the circle, in this case a unit circle, and then I just marked the height of it every time I got to a particular location. I could have picked any locations as long as I was consistent. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to lay these out, and you're going to see how that turns into a wave. All right, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to connect the dots. So I'm going to connect here, and I'm going to connect all the tops, and you'll see all of that put out. So what happens when you connect those dots? We started off right here, and we went around the drum, and I marked them. As I connected those dots, what we ended up with was a whole wave. Now I didn't mark every single mark around the whole circle when I measured that string, but when I start to connect those dots in a smooth curve, you get your sine wave. Alright, so let's try to recap a little bit. Got a drum. We're going to pretend like this is the unit circle. I started off by taking that length of string and I measured the length of string all the way around. So, a particular length will map to a particular location around the drum. When we look at that and we measure the height as we go around this circle at particular locations, and we keep track of those turn into that sine wave that you just looked at. So what if we didn't measure the height? What if we measured the width from the center out to that location? So if I measured instead of that, instead of measuring the height, what if each one of my string lengths was from the center out there, right? So my first length of string would be this height, or this width, right? And I could continually do that. What would happen if I did that? What we haven't discovered or looked at is why sine does that, and I haven't really unpacked that for you, and that's what the next video is about. So I'm going to be using a computer program to show you the relationship there and why I said that that wave was the sine wave rather than calling it anything else. It really is just a relationship between the height and where we are at as we go around the circle. We'll connect that in the next video. But I hope you enjoy this one.